What if I told you that one family has played a significant role in the international opioid crisis? A crisis that has devastated communities globally, taking countless lives and leaving a trail of despair in its wake. This isn't a tale of an anonymous, faceless entity, but rather a story about the Sackler family, the owners of Purdue Pharma, the makers of OxyContin. OxyContin, a powerful opioid painkiller, has been at the heart of this crisis. It's a drug that's been overprescribed, misused, and abused, leading to addiction, overdoses, and all too often, death. But behind this drug, behind this crisis, stands the Sackler family. The Sacklers, a name synonymous with philanthropy, with their fingerprints on some of the world's most esteemed institutions. They've funded wings at the Louvre, endowed professorships at Yale, and their name adorns galleries at the Metropolitan Museum of Art. Their wealth, seemingly boundless, their influence, far-reaching. But peel back the veneer of philanthropy, and a different image emerges. An image of a family whose wealth has been largely built on the sale of OxyContin, a drug that has wreaked havoc on millions of lives. The Sacklers didn't just profit from OxyContin, they aggressively marketed it, pushing it onto doctors and patients, while downplaying its addictive potential. The contrast between the public image of the Sacklers and their involvement in the opioid crisis is stark. On one hand, they are seen as patrons of the arts, benefactors of science, and pillars of society. On the other, they are seen as architects of a crisis that has claimed hundreds of thousands of lives. In recent years, the family's involvement in the opioid crisis has come under scrutiny. Lawsuits have been filed, settlements reached, and their name, once associated with philanthropy, is now linked to one of the most significant public health crises of our time. So, who are the Sacklers and how did they amass their enormous wealth? Stay tuned as we delve into the history of this family, their controversial business practices, and their role in the international opioid crisis. The Sackler family's journey to wealth and influence started with three brothers, Arthur, Mortimer, and Raymond Sackler. Born to immigrant parents in the bustling borough of Brooklyn, New York, the brothers were instilled with an unwavering work ethic and a drive to succeed from an early age. Each brother pursued a path in medicine, obtaining degrees from some of the world's most prestigious institutions. Arthur, the eldest, became a pioneer in medical advertising, using his knowledge of psychiatry to craft messages that resonated with physicians. Mortimer and Raymond, on the other hand, delved into the world of pharmaceuticals, driven by a fascination with the potential of medicine to change lives. In the late 1950s, the brothers made a bold move that would set the stage for their future empire. They acquired a small pharmaceutical company, Purdue Frederick, which they would later transform into Purdue Pharma. This company, unbeknownst to them, would become the cornerstone of their wealth and the source of their infamy. At Purdue, the Sacklers saw an opportunity to revolutionize pain management. They developed a potent new drug, OxyContin, which they claimed could provide extended relief from pain with a minimal risk of addiction. With their keen understanding of marketing, they promoted OxyContin aggressively to doctors and patients, painting it as a miracle solution for chronic pain. And so, the seeds were sown. The Sacklers' pharmaceutical empire grew exponentially, with OxyContin becoming one of the most prescribed drugs of its time. The family's fortune ballooned into the billions, placing them amongst the wealthiest in the world. Yet as their wealth accumulated, so did the number of OxyContin prescriptions. And with it, a dark undercurrent began to emerge, a wave of addiction that would soon grow into a full-blown crisis. With the introduction of OxyContin, the Sacklers' fortunes began to skyrocket, but so did the opioid crisis. OxyContin, hailed as a miracle drug for pain management, soon revealed its dark side. The drug, marketed as a panacea for pain, would soon prove to be a Pandora's box of problems. You see, OxyContin was aggressively promoted by Purdue Pharma, the pharmaceutical giant owned by the Sackler family. They painted a rosy picture of a world where pain could be managed effectively without the risk of addiction. But behind the glossy marketing campaigns and high-profile endorsements, there was a grim reality. The fact is, OxyContin was highly addictive, leading to a surge in opioid addiction cases. Imagine a substance so potent that it could ensnare its users in a web of dependency with just a few doses. That was OxyContin. Their aggressive marketing strategies, coupled with a lack of clear communication about the addiction risks, had a catastrophic impact. To make matters worse, the widespread use of OxyContin led to a sharp increase in overdose deaths. It was as if a silent killer was on the loose, claiming lives indiscriminately. The victims were not just the addicts themselves, but their families, friends, and communities too. They were all caught in the destructive path of OxyContin's wave, a wave that seemed to grow bigger and more terrifying with each passing day. What was equally shocking was the denial and deflection from Purdue Pharma and the Sackler family. As the evidence piled up, they continued to promote OxyContin with the same fervor, seemingly indifferent to the suffering they were causing. They were more interested in protecting their profits than the well-being of their customers. It was a classic case of putting profits before people, a sad testament to the corporate greed that often goes unchecked. As the crisis worsened, questions started to arise about Purdue Pharma and the Sackler family's responsibility. The world was waking up to the harsh reality of the opioid crisis, and it was clear that someone needed to be held accountable. The question was, who would that be? Despite the opioid crisis, the Sacklers continued to thrive. A family that once stood on the periphery of prominence had now become a household name, their wealth ballooning into the billions. Not just content with their affluence, they sought to leave their mark on the world, extending their influence into the realms of art, education, and science. Their philanthropic efforts were lauded, and their names adorned the walls of prestigious institutions around the globe. From the Sackler Gallery at the Smithsonian Institution in Washington, D.C., to the Sackler Wing at the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York, their legacy seemed to be one of generosity and cultural enrichment. But behind this glossy veneer of philanthropy, a darker narrative was being written. The very source of their wealth, Purdue Pharma's OxyContin, was wreaking havoc on communities. The stark contrast between their public image of benefactors and the private reality of their business operations couldn't have been more glaring. OxyContin, marketed as a miracle drug for pain relief, was now being linked to an escalating opioid crisis. It was a silent killer, claiming thousands of lives and leaving countless families in ruins. Yet amidst this devastating crisis, the Sacklers' fortune continued to grow, reaching an estimated value of $13 billion at its peak. The family's wealth was not only a testament to their business acumen, but also a symbol of the profound disconnect between the creators of OxyContin and its victims. To the world, the Sacklers were art patrons and scientific benefactors, but to the families affected by the opioid crisis, they were the architects of their suffering. As the public began to connect the dots between the Sacklers' wealth and the opioid crisis, their reputation began to tarnish. The very institutions that once proudly bore their names started distancing themselves, and the family's legacy of philanthropy was now being viewed through a lens of skepticism. However, their empire began to crumble as lawsuits started to pile up. Purdue Pharma, once the Sacklers' golden goose, eventually faced the music. The company, which had been raking in billions, found itself in the midst of a storm. Lawsuits began to pile up against both Purdue Pharma and the Sackler family. Accusations were heavy and damning, alleging that they had played a significant role in the international opioid crisis. The lawsuits were not just from individuals affected by the crisis. Entire states, medical institutions, and even countries began to demand accountability. The Sacklers, who had once been celebrated as philanthropists and benefactors, were now being viewed in a different light. Their name, which had once graced institutions and programs, was now being associated with a crisis that had claimed countless lives. In the face of mounting legal pressure, Purdue Pharma declared bankruptcy in 2019. This move effectively put a pause on the lawsuits against the company. However, it did little to quell the public outcry against the Sacklers. The family found itself under increased scrutiny, their past actions under a microscope. In the wake of the bankruptcy declaration, settlement proposals began to surface. One notable proposal required the Sacklers to pay up to $6 billion for opioid crisis abatement. This proposal was $1 billion more than a previous agreement and did not protect the Sacklers from future liability. The settlement required the approval of a federal bankruptcy court judge and marked a significant point in the ongoing saga. Although the family agreed to express regret, they stopped short of admitting any illegal behavior. This lack of admission did little to sway public opinion, and the Sacklers found themselves increasingly isolated. The future of Purdue Pharma and the Sackler family now hangs in the balance. With lawsuits still pending and public sentiment against them, the once powerful family finds itself in a precarious position. The fall from grace has been steep and swift, a stark reminder of the potential cost of greed and indifference. The Sacklers, though expressing regret, have never admitted to any wrongdoing, a sentiment that rings loud and clear, echoing through the annals of the opioid crisis. The Sackler family, while acknowledging the devastating impact of the opioid epidemic, have maintained a steadfast refusal to admit any guilt or accept any blame for the role their company Purdue Pharma may have played in it. Their regret, expressed in carefully worded statements, seems more a response to the public outcry than a genuine admission of remorse. They have agreed to pay billions towards opioid crisis abatement, a sum that seems astronomical, yet pales in comparison to the wealth they amassed. This agreement, however, comes with a caveat. There is no admission of illegal behavior. In a move that could be seen as an attempt to distance themselves from the crisis, they've agreed to the potential removal of the Sackler name from institutions. It's a significant shift considering the prominence of their name on world-renowned facilities and programs. Yet, even in this, there's a catch. The family must be notified, and any public statements should not disparage them. One can't help but wonder whether this is a genuine attempt to make amends or simply a strategic move to protect their reputation. This leaves us in a peculiar position. On one hand, there's a palpable sense of justice with the billions set to be paid by the Sacklers. On the other, there's this lingering question of accountability. Yes, they've expressed regret, but without any admission of guilt, can there truly be atonement? So, where does this leave us? And more importantly, where does it leave the victims of the opioid crisis? Despite settlements and bankruptcies, the opioid crisis continues. The ripples of the devastation caused by Purdue Pharma and the Sackler family's actions are still being felt across the globe. The opioid crisis is not a closed chapter in history, but a continuing tragedy that affects millions of people every day. In the wake of the fallout, various organizations and governments have dedicated themselves to combat this crisis. Multiple strategies are being employed, from increasing access to treatment and recovery services, promoting the use of overdose-reversing drugs, strengthening our understanding of the epidemic through better public health surveillance, providing support for cutting-edge research on pain and addiction, and advancing better practices for pain management. Yet, the challenges that remain are monumental. Despite the best efforts of these organizations, the number of people affected continues to rise. The opioid crisis has woven itself into the fabric of our society, impacting not just the addicted individuals, but entire communities and generations. The opioid crisis has underscored the urgent need for a more responsible and ethical approach to pharmaceutical development and marketing. It is a stark reminder that the pursuit of profit should never supersede the value of human life and well-being. The Sackler family and Purdue Pharma's role in the crisis has catalyzed a crucial conversation about corporate responsibility and accountability in public health. The story of Purdue Pharma and the Sackler family is not just about a powerful corporation and a wealthy family. It is a story about people, about lives lost and lives forever changed due to a system that allowed corporate greed to triumph over public health. As we grapple with the ongoing impact of the opioid crisis, we must remember the lessons learned from this tragedy. We must strive for a world where corporations are held accountable for their actions, where the health and well-being of individuals are prioritized over profit, and where such a crisis can never happen again. The Sackler family's story serves as a stark reminder of the devastating effects of corporate greed on public health.